Yo, it's Go and welcome to the video. I want to go over my spec and rotation that I'm planning on using in the pre-patch. So yes, I'm level 80, but I've only spent 61 points. Creating a new tune on the beta from scratch takes so long to learn all the spells, put every spell on your cast bar in the right spot. So I just redid my talents just for this example. If you want to skip ahead to the rotation, there's timestamps in the description. So this spec is purely built around single target and the rotation that I want to use. So I've got 5 out of 5 Starlight Wrath, and I've also got 5 out of 5 Genesis. I changed my mind about this talent because it affects Starfall damage, and from what I've heard, and what seems to be true, is using Starfall even on single targets is the way to go. It's still doing great damage on just one target. Got 3 out of 3 Moonglow and Nature's Majesty, 2 out of 2 improved Moonfire, got Nature's Grace filled out, Nature's Reach. Gotta pause it for a second right there while I'm editing this. I'm thinking about having that point in Nature Splendor to increase that Moonfire that extra 3 seconds. So could take a point out of improved Moonfire or Dream State if we're not having those mana issues and slap that point into here. As you'll see in the rotation, my plan is to have Moonfire up early and have it last through casting all the Wraths to get into that Lunar phase and still be up and not have to cast it at the start of Lunar phase. So having this might help just in case it takes that extra couple casts of Wrath to get into the Lunar phase. Back to the talents. Skipping Splendor and Brambles. Then I've got Lunar Guidance, only the 1 point to get Insect Swarm. I only plan on using this if I'm moving. I'm not planning on using this in Solar phase at the start to try to use improved Insect Swarms bonus. The only reason I might end up trying to get these 3 points is for the crit chance on Starfire. But with limited options, I'm just deciding not to use it. If you're going to use it, I'm sure that you're going to also have Insect Swarm in your rotation, and there's nothing wrong with being different. Then I do have 2 out of 3 Dream State. Mana does seem to be a bit of an issue, so hopefully a couple points in Dream State will help out with some in-combat mana regen. Then I do have Proved Fairy Fire. It's just something at the start of the fight that we can pop, and it should be up for the whole fight length and just give us that 3% crit, which is going to be nice for Starfire and Starfall, but that 3% crit on Wrath is what's going to be important the most. And I'm skipping Alkin Frenzy, and it really pains me to not have points in there. But maybe the first week of pre-patch, after the first Sunwell raid, if I'm hearing some hype over Alkin Frenzy proccing from people that are putting points into it, then I would switch points into here in a heartbeat. Then I've got the rest of the tree except for the AoE Typhoon and Gale Winds. And that is all 61 points, so there's no points in the Feral tree and none in the Resto tree. Then for Glyphs, I have the Glyph of Moonfire and Starfire. We will not have access to Focus or Starfall in the pre-patch. The trainers for those are only found in Northrend, so even if we can get herbs from the Darkmoon Fair vendor, there still won't be any scribes that can learn either of those 2 glyphs. And my AoE spec I'll go over at the end of the video if you're interested in that. But for now, let's do the rotation. Okay, so I've made a couple of macros. First one that I'll use in my rotation is a slash cast Destropot and Force of Nature. So we're going to pre-pop this before the fight starts. So as the pull timer gets down to 1 second left, I'll pre-pop this macro, and then my next global is going to be Fairy Fire. So I have slash cast Fairy Fire and slash pet attack. So I'll summon them next to me and then use Fairy Fire to make them attack the boss. Third thing I'm going to use is Starfall and then Moonfire into spamming Wrath until Lunar phase procs. As soon as Lunar procs, I'll use my Skull of Gul'dan and Starfire. And I will Starfire until Solar phase. And Wrath once in Solar. Then I'm thinking, or once I get back to Lunar phase for the second time, the potion cooldown should be off, and I can use a haste potion in the second Lunar phase. And also pop my unused trinket. But this is going to depend on how fast I get into the first Lunar phase and Solar phase. So enough talking, let's try to do it. Alright, starting off with the pre-pop of the Treants and Destropot, losing a couple seconds of their uptime, but doing the cast before the fight starts means that global cooldown used to cast them isn't going to affect our DPS. It's just going to be pure raw DPS from them without having that GCD counted in the DPS. Wow, that was a lot. Alright, I got the Fairy Fire and Starfall, Moonfire into the Wrath cast. Wrath took a little bit too long to get into Lunar Phase, so my first Starfire didn't go off to start increasing the duration of Moonfire, the extra 9 seconds like I hoped, so that's where that Nature Splendor point would really come into play. If I had that extra 3 seconds, then I could have made it into Lunar and kept it up. So right out of that, I should have innervated right there instead of casting more Starfires to get into the Solar Phase, and I wouldn't have ran out of mana. So since I ran out of mana, I stopped casting and pretended like it was taking a couple more seconds to get into the second Lunar Phase, which is where I would pop the other DPS cooldowns, the Haste Potion, Bark Skin, on use Trinket, and made sure that macro was going to work, and just cast those Starfires through that phase. And then it's just a rinse and repeat, just going from Lunar to Solar, Solar to Lunar, popping Starfall when it's off of cooldown in between phases, and hoping for some crits. The important thing with the Destro Pot is giving our Wrath that 2% extra chance to crit to try to help get into that first Lunar Phase as quick as we can. Didn't help me on that example, but again, with all the extra raid buffs, hopefully the crit percent that we have will be high enough. And I'm also missing about like 10% crit from being level 80. All the stats are squished, so it's a lot harder for me to crit with the same gear that I had at level 70. So I have the macro for the Starfire, Potion of Speed, which is just a Haste Pot. Bark Skin, because why not? This is where a lot of our damage is going to be. You could pop it with the Skull if you have Skull at the start of the rotation, or if the fight's going to be shorter, just to try to protect all your cooldowns from any sort of pushback. And then I've got my Unused Trinket and Starfire. Mage gave me some Focus Magic. I got 3% extra crit from that, almost up to 20% now. Let's try this rotation a second time. Alright, attempt number 2. Got the Treants pre-popped, got Fairy Fire off, Starfall, Moonfire, and began casting Wrath. It again took a bunch of Wrath casts in order to get into Lunar. It's only a 60% chance when Wrath crits in order to get into Lunar Phase. I got into Lunar just in time to be able to increase the Moonfire duration, the extra 9 seconds with the Glyph. Worked out perfect. And then in between the phases, I popped my Innervate this time, continuing casting Starfire. As soon as one Starfire crits, that's a 100% chance to get into Solar. So got into Solar, casting the Wraths again. So I was pumping a bunch of Wraths. Took a little bit longer to get back into the second Lunar Phase, but as soon as I got there, I was able to pop all my other cooldowns, the Haste Potion, on use Trinket, Bark Skin, and get that second nice round of DPS. That's my plan overall. Hope it's gonna work. Guess I can add to the rotation at the end to Moonfire after Solar. And this is really just because I have the 4-piece tier 5 still with the 4-piece tier 6. So having Moonfire up is just gonna benefit that my Starfire cast, that extra 10%. If you've got Sunwell gear instead of tier 5, or you just have a full set of tier 6, then you really don't have to worry about Moonfire too much. You can just use Moonfire to move if you have to move. Or if you did pick up those points in improved Insect Swarm, then you could use that Moonfire right when you get into Lunar Phase. Since both of the glyphs that I have buff Moonfire, that's another reason I'm just trying to keep it up for my Lunar Phases. But that's it for this one. Warlocks, I see you checking me out. I'm coming for that top DPS spot. So pop Treants, Fairy Fire, fucked it up,